There is a moment most people never forget, even if they spend decades trying to. You are standing in a kitchen or sitting at a dinner table or waiting by the phone, and something happens, something small enough that no one else would notice. A tone of voice, a dismissal, a silence where warmth should have been, and something inside you contracts. Not for the first time, for what feels like the 1,000th time. And the strange, disorienting part is that you are no longer a child. You may be 30 years old or 40 or 55, and yet in this moment, you are precisely as small as you ever were. The contraction is familiar. The ache is familiar. You know this feeling the way you know how to breathe, not because you chose it, but because your body learned it before you had words for anything at all. You have tried, probably, to understand this. You have read the books. You have sat across from therapists. You have journaled and meditated and cut off contact and re-established it. You have forgiven or tried to, and found that the forgiveness did not hold the way you hoped it would, that it needed to be repeated endlessly, like bailing water from a boat with a slow leak. You have had the conversations, the real ones where you told her how you felt, and you watched something close behind her eyes, some protective shutter, and you understood that the conversation was already over before it had truly begun. Maybe you have simply gone quiet about the whole thing, convinced yourself it was not that bad, that other people had it worse, that you are making something out of nothing, but the contraction keeps coming. The ache does not leave. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a question has been living that you have been almost afraid to ask directly. Why can I not get past this? What I want to explore with you today is not a technique or a protocol. I'm not going to offer you a list of steps to heal your mother wound. What I want to offer instead is a reorientation, a way of seeing what is actually happening when we find ourselves caught in this particular kind of suffering, because I believe that most of the strategies people use to heal from their relationship with their mother are working from a fundamentally incomplete understanding of what the problem is. And when your diagnosis is incomplete, your treatment cannot reach the actual wound. The truth I want to share with you is one that has the capacity to change not just how you relate to your mother, but how you relate to yourself, to your own longing, to the very structure of your needs. It is not a comfortable truth, but it is, I believe, a liberating one. If this way of thinking is opening something for you, consider subscribing. I explore these territories every week, and I would be honored to have you along for this particular kind of inquiry. Let us begin with what we think the problem is. Most people, when they speak about their mother wound, frame it primarily as a relational problem. The relationship was damaged, the attachment was insecure, the mother was unavailable or critical or controlling or absent in some essential way. The child, which is to say you, received insufficient nurturance, insufficient mirroring, insufficient attunement. The solution then seems obvious. Repair the relationship, or mourn the relationship that never was, or find substitutes for what was missing. And there is genuine insight in this framing. It is not wrong exactly, but it is radically incomplete, and the incompleteness is precisely what keeps so many people circling the same wound for years, without arriving anywhere fundamentally different. Here is what I want you to consider. What if the mother wound is not primarily a wound about your mother at all? What if what we call the mother wound is actually a wound about reality, about the nature of existence itself, and your mother was simply the first and most intimate surface through which that wound was delivered? I know many of you have been carrying this alone, perhaps for decades, in the private space where the question of your mother lives. Maybe you have never said out loud that you still feel the ache, that you still hope for something different, even when you tell yourself you have given up hoping, that the relationship still has the power to undo you in ways you find humiliating. Let me ask you directly, how long have you been trying to understand why this particular wound will not close? When did you first realize that the love you needed and the love you received were somehow not the same thing? I want you to leave a comment below and tell me where you are in this, not because I need engagement, but because someone else watching this is living in silence with the exact same question, and they need to know that silence is not required. If words feel difficult right now, just type, "I am still carrying this." That is enough. Because when you do, you give others permission to say the same, and that permission matters more than you may know. I read every comment, and I promise you, you are not as alone in this as it feels. To understand what I mean by the wound being about reality itself, we need to think carefully about what a mother actually represents in the early architecture of a human psyche. A child does not experience its mother as a separate person, not at first. The mother is experienced as something closer to the ground itself, to the conditions of existence. She is warmth, she is food, she is the sound that means safety, and the absence that means danger. Before language, before thought as we recognize it, the mother is the world. Philosophers of childhood, psychologists who work at the edge of experience and language, have tried to describe this state, this original merger, where the self has not yet distinguished itself from the environment, and what they consistently find is that the mother is not just a person in this state. She is something more like a principle. She is the principle of provision, of welcome, the living answer to the question of whether existence is safe, whether being here is acceptable, whether you, as a particular and specific form of life, are received or merely tolerated. This is why the mother wound cuts so deep, and why it has so little to do, ultimately, with what your specific mother did or did not do. It is because the wound is recorded at the level where the question was existential. When a child reaches toward its mother and encounters inconsistency or coldness or conditional love, what is being metabolized is not simply the information that this particular person is unreliable. What is being metabolized is a conclusion about the nature of reality. The world is not consistently safe, warmth is not guaranteed, being fully yourself, with all your needs visible, may not be met with welcome. These conclusions, formed before the capacity for conscious examination, become the lens through which every subsequent experience is filtered. And here is the crucial point that most healing frameworks do not adequately address. You did not form these conclusions about your mother. You formed them about life. You formed them about what it means to be a human being who needs other human beings, about whether the fact of your need is something shameful or something natural, about whether you are fundamentally the kind of entity that will be received or the kind that must earn its welcome. Your mother was the messenger. The message was about existence. Now, why does this matter? Why is this distinction between the messenger and the message not merely philosophical, but practically significant for healing? It matters because when we focus our healing work only on the mother, we are trying to solve an equation by changing one variable while leaving the deeper structure untouched. People spend years in therapy working through their mother wound and making genuine progress, genuine understanding, genuine grief, and then find that the same pattern reappears in their relationship with a partner, or a boss, or a close friend, or in their relationship with God or the universe or whatever form the transcendent takes for them. The wound has not been healed. It has been relocated. Because the wound was never fundamentally about the mother, it was always about the structure of need and provision, about the question of whether the world is a place where a person like you can be fully received. Hannah Arendt wrote in her examination of the human condition about the strangeness of natality, her word for the condition of having been born, of having been brought into a world you did not choose, by people you did not choose, into circumstances you did not design. She understood natality not merely as a biological fact, but as a philosophical one, as the source of a particular kind of vulnerability that is native to being human. We each arrive as a new beginning, a fresh form of consciousness, and we arrive dependent, completely utterly dependent, on specific people, on specific conditions, on specific forms of provision and welcome, and those specific people and conditions are never perfect. They cannot be. They are themselves products of their own arrivals, their own wounds about provision and welcome, their own unexamined conclusions about whether the world is safe. Your mother brought you into being, and she was, simultaneously, a person who herself arrived, once, needing exactly what you needed and received in some incomplete and imperfect way, the same mixed message you later received from her. This is not an invitation to excuse your mother, or to minimize what was painful, or to skip over the real and legitimate grief of having needed something that was not consistently available. The grief is real. The need was real. What was missing was genuinely missing. None of that is being denied. What I am suggesting is a different understanding of the ground from which the wound grows, because when you understand the ground correctly, You stop trying to heal a wound in one particular place, and you begin addressing the actual condition. The actual condition is this: you are a human being whose earliest experience of needing taught you something incomplete and painful about what happens when need is visible. And that lesson, recorded at the cellular level of your earliest consciousness, has been running in the background of your life ever since, shaping who you allow yourself to be, what you allow yourself to want, whether you allow your need to be seen. Think about the strategies you have developed over your lifetime. Notice them with some clarity and compassion. Perhaps you became someone who anticipates others' needs before they can disappoint you with their inability to meet yours. Perhaps you became someone who needs very little, or tells yourself so. Perhaps you became someone who gives with a terrible ferocity because giving feels safer than receiving, because in giving you maintain some control over the transaction that you never had as a child, waiting to see what version of your mother would arrive. Perhaps you became someone who tests love, who creates situations where the other person must prove they will not leave, not because you are manipulative, but because the original lesson about provision was so unreliable that you cannot believe in the permanence of warmth without constant verification. Perhaps you became someone who is exquisitely sensitive to criticism, because the original voice that delivered criticism had the power of the world itself behind it. None of these strategies are flaws. They are adaptations. They are profoundly intelligent responses to the original lesson. The problem is not that they were stupid. The problem is that they are no longer serving you in a world where you are no longer that child, in a body that is no longer that small, in a life where you have genuine agency and genuine resources that the original child did not possess. But here is what makes this so difficult to change. The strategies feel like they are about other people. They feel like they are about your mother, or your partner, or your colleagues. They feel external. But they are fundamentally about your relationship with your own need. They are about whether you believe that the fact of your needing is acceptable, is tolerable, is something the world can bear to witness. And that belief was formed so early, and so thoroughly, and is so woven into the texture of your ordinary experience that it does not feel like a belief. It feels like reality. It feels like simply the way things are. This is where the work of real healing begins. Not in analyzing your mother, though that has its place. Not in forgiving her, though that may come. Not in renegotiating your relationship with her, though that too may be part of the journey. The beginning of real healing is in the slow, careful, patient project of revising the original lesson, not denying it, not bypassing it with positivity, but examining it with the kind of clear, unflinching attention that begins to reveal it as a lesson, as an interpretation, as a conclusion that was drawn by a consciousness too small to have drawn any other conclusion at the time, but which you now, with your greater capacity for reflection, are not obligated to keep treating as fact. What does it actually mean to revise this lesson? It begins with something that sounds simple and is actually profound. It begins with the willingness to let your need be seen, at least by yourself. To stop treating your own longing as something embarrassing, as something that must be managed or hidden or justified. There is a quality of attention that some people receive in early childhood, and others do not. A quality that communicates. Your experience is interesting. Your feelings are real. Your presence here is not a burden but a gift. For those who did not receive this quality of attention, the compensatory strategy is often to make themselves as undemanding as possible, as streamlined as possible, as easy to have around as possible. And this strategy has costs that accumulate quietly over time. You stop knowing what you actually want because wanting felt dangerous. You stop trusting your own perceptions because your perceptions were not consistently validated. You become skilled at attending to others and an amateur at attending to yourself. I want you to pause for a moment and notice something. Wherever you are right now, whatever you are feeling, whether it is recognition or resistance or a complicated mixture of both, notice that you are here. You came to this exploration willingly. Something in you is still looking, still seeking to understand, still carrying the question, even after whatever attempts at healing you have already made. That is not a sign of failure. That is a sign of something alive in you, something that has not given up on the possibility of a different relationship with your own experience. Honor that. It is not nothing. It is, in fact, everything. If what I am sharing here is resonating with something you have been carrying, I want you to know you are not alone. There are many of us sitting with these questions, learning to revise old lessons, discovering that healing is not about becoming someone who never needed anything, but about becoming someone who can need without shame. I create these explorations for people who are ready to go deeper, who sense that the surface answers are not enough, who want genuine understanding rather than temporary comfort. If that is you, consider subscribing. Not because you need another source of content, but because this kind of sustained inquiry, week after week, builds something. It builds a different relationship with your own mind, and I would be honored to be a companion in that. Hit the subscribe button if this feels like the right community, and tell me in the comments, what is it that you most want to understand about this wound? Your questions shape where we go together. Let me say something now about the relationship between this wound and the specific person who is your mother, because it would be incomplete to speak only of the existential dimension without acknowledging the very real, very particular person who delivered the original lesson. Your mother is a person. That sounds obvious, but it is actually something that takes considerable work to genuinely see, because she has been, since the very beginning, so much more than a person in your experience. She has been a principle, a force, a weather system. She has been the first and most powerful mirror you ever looked into, and what you saw reflected there shaped how you see yourself to this day. The work of coming to see her as a person, a full, complex, limited, wounded, sometimes loving, sometimes failing person, is not about reducing her power over you by dismissing her. It is about recovering her humanity, which is simultaneously to recover your own. When we keep a parent in the category of force or principle, we cannot grieve them properly. We cannot grieve a principle. We cannot mourn the fact that the weather was not what we needed, but we can grieve a person. We can sit with the reality that this particular person in this particular life, with these particular limitations, was not consistently able to give what you needed, not because you were unworthy, not because there was something fundamentally wrong with you that prevented the receiving of love, but because she was a person, and persons are limited, and the limitation was hers, not a verdict on your value. This grief, when it is allowed to be fully felt rather than managed or bypassed, is one of the most healing experiences available to us. It is different from the grief of anger, which is hot and energizing and often necessary, but which keeps the mother in the position of antagonist. It is different from the grief of longing, which stays oriented toward what might still be possible, rather than settling into what was and what was not. It is the quiet, final grief of acceptance, not resignation, not giving up, but genuine seeing. This is what happened. This person, with this life, with these wounds of her own, gave what she could and could not give what she did not have. That is the truth. And the truth, for all its sadness, is not as dangerous as the story we have been telling instead. Because what is the story most of us have been telling? We have been telling a story about ourselves. Unconsciously, silently, beneath the analytical frameworks and the therapeutic language, we have been running a narrative that goes something like this. If she could not consistently love me, it must be because I am not consistently lovable. If the warmth was conditional, I must have been insufficient to earn the unconditional version. If I reached and was not reliably met, there must be something about my reaching that is wrong. This story is so fundamental, so early, so woven into the fabric of self-experience that most people do not even recognize it as a story. They recognize it as themselves, as who they are, as simply the truth of their particular existence. This is the conclusion I want to challenge most directly. The conclusion I believe is the actual source of suffering, more than any specific thing your mother did or did not do. The conclusion that the inconsistency of her love was information about your worth rather than information about her capacity. This conclusion, formed before you had the conceptual tools to examine it, before you had enough life experience to triangulate it against other data, before you had the cognitive development to understand that adults are not omniscient providers, but wounded humans navigating their own survival. This conclusion is the wound, not her behavior. Her behavior was the event. The wound is the meaning you made of the event, the only meaning a small consciousness could have made, but a meaning that does not have to remain permanent. Arendt had a concept she called thinking, and she distinguished it carefully from cognition, from mere information processing. Thinking for her was the internal dialogue through which we examine our own experience and our own assumptions, through which we refuse to allow the unexamined to govern us. She was deeply concerned with what she called the inability to think, the condition in which people act on conclusions they have never examined, in which the habits of perception and interpretation run on without scrutiny. The mother wound, in its deepest form, is precisely such an unexamined conclusion. It is a conclusion about your worth, your lovability, your fundamental acceptability, drawn in conditions that could not support accurate drawing and then never revised, never examined, never brought into the light where it could be tested against the larger reality of who you have become and what you actually know. The work then is a work of thinking in Arendt's sense, not analysis in the clinical sense, though that has value. Not intellectualizing the wound away, which is simply another form of avoidance, but genuine examination. The willingness to ask, is this conclusion true? Not just true in the sense of did it happen, but true in the sense of, is it an accurate interpretation of what happened? Did her inconsistency actually tell us something about my worth? Or did it tell us something about the conditions under which love and capacity operate in a human life? When I reach for connection and am met with ambivalence, is that information about whether I deserve to be received, or is it information about the other person's access to their own capacity for receiving? This examination, done slowly and with great compassion for the consciousness that formed the original conclusion, is where healing actually lives, not in achieving a perfect relationship with your mother, not in the fantasy of the conversation that finally makes her understand, not in becoming someone who no longer needs, who has transcended the messy human reality of longing for warmth from the person who first embodied warmth, but in the gradual, painstaking revision of the foundational story, the story that says your need is a problem, that says your worth was always in question, that says the inconsistency of her love was a judgment rather than a limitation. There is something important to understand about what makes this revision so difficult, something beyond the obvious fact that early conclusions are deeply embedded. It is this: the original story has been protecting you. The conclusion that you are insufficiently lovable has been functioning as a theory of causality, an explanation for why things happened the way they did. Theories of causality, even painful ones, provide a kind of order. If I am the problem, then I can, in theory, fix the problem. If I become more perfect, more accommodating, more deserving, the love will finally become consistent. This theory, painful as it is, preserves some sense of agency. It keeps hope alive in a specific, if tortured, form. The alternative, which is to understand that the inconsistency was never about you at all, that it was about forces entirely outside your influence or control, is paradoxically more threatening. Because it means you were never in control. It means the thing you needed was never something you could earn or achieve. It means you were, from the very beginning, dependent on a fortune that was not reliably good, and you had no recourse. This is the wound beneath the wound. Not just the pain of insufficient love, but the terror of having been genuinely helpless, genuinely dependent on something you could not control, genuinely vulnerable to the inconsistency of someone else's capacity. To heal this layer is to accept the fundamental helplessness of early childhood, not as something shameful, but as something true. It is to grieve not only the specific failures of your specific mother, but the condition of dependence itself, the naked, unmasterable reality of having needed before you could choose what to need, of having been shaped by forces before you could consent to being shaped. This acceptance, when it comes, does not feel like defeat. It feels, strangely, like relief. Because the effort of maintaining the story, the effort of staying in the position of the one who might yet achieve the love that was always conditional, is exhausting. It is an effort that never ends. There is no final amount of self-improvement, no ultimate performance of worthiness that will close the gap between the love you needed and the love that was available. The gap was never about your performance. It was about conditions. And when you finally know that, When you let yourself know that fully and without flinching, something releases. Not everything, not immediately, but something real, something that has been held very tightly for a very long time. I want to speak for a moment to those of you for whom none of this feels possible yet, for whom the idea of revising the foundational story feels abstract and remote, like something that might be achievable in theory, but not in the actual texture of your daily experience, where the old conclusions feel as solid and immovable as furniture. I want to say this: the fact that change feels impossible is itself part of the original wound. One of the things that is recorded in the original lesson is that the conditions of your existence are fixed, that what was will always be, that the love that was insufficient will remain insufficient, that the world as it was originally experienced is the world as it is. This is again an entirely understandable conclusion for a small consciousness to reach, but it is not accurate. The conditions of your existence have changed enormously. You are not that child. You have resources that child did not have. You have crucially the capacity for the kind of reflective examination we are engaged in right now. And reflection, genuine reflection, is itself a form of freedom. It is not a feeling of freedom. It is a capacity for freedom, a capacity to insert some distance between the automatic conclusion and the automatic response, to ask whether the conclusion is still serving you, to choose, with growing deliberateness, a different way of understanding. This is slow work. It is not dramatic. It rarely involves the cathartic breakthrough that the healing industry sells. It involves 1,000 small moments of noticing when the old conclusion is running, noticing when you are treating your need as a problem, noticing when you are performing worthiness for an audience that is not actually present, noticing when the contraction comes and instead of contracting further from it, allowing it to be there while also allowing some part of you to observe it with curiosity rather than dread. Over time, this noticing creates a different relationship to the original wound. Not the absence of the wound, but a different way of being in relation to it, a way that does not require you to be reduced by it every time it is activated. And this, I want to say, is the most honest thing I can offer about healing from the mother wound. Not that it leads to a place where you no longer feel the ache, where the old contraction never comes, where the relationship with your mother is finally resolved into something clean and uncomplicated, but that you become someone who can be in the presence of the ache without being fully governed by it, who can feel the contraction without losing the larger awareness that the contraction is not the totality of what you are, who can want the love that was not consistently available without that wanting becoming the organizing principle of your entire existence. Because here is something that becomes visible from this perspective, something that is genuinely beautiful, even in its sadness. The capacity for the kind of love you were looking for, the unconditional, warm, consistently available, genuinely receiving love, that capacity is not missing from the universe. It is not a fantasy or an impossible demand. It exists. It exists in the quality of attention you can bring to your own experience when you stop treating your experience as the problem. It exists in moments of genuine contact between people who have done enough of their own work to be actually present. It exists, surprisingly and uncomplicatedly, in the quality of presence you can bring to ordinary moments when you are not contracted around the old wound. The love you were looking for was real. It was just not available from the specific source at the specific time when you needed it most. That is a tragedy, but it is not a permanent verdict on what is possible. I want to share something with you before we close. Hannah Arendt wrote about what she called the space of appearance, the shared space that comes into being when people gather and act and speak together, the space in which human significance becomes visible. She thought this space was fragile and precious, always at risk of collapse but always capable of being renewed. I think there is a private version of this space, an inner space of appearance, in which the significance of your own experience, your own longings, your own perceptions becomes visible to you. For those who carry the mother wound, this inner space has often been partially collapsed, partly because the original experience of being seen was unreliable, and partly because you learned to collapse it yourself as a form of protection. The work of healing is, in part, the work of allowing this inner space to expand again, of learning to let your own experience appear to you with the full reality and significance it deserves. This is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the ground from which every other form of healing grows. When you can be present to yourself with something approaching the quality of attention you always needed from your mother, something shifts at a level deeper than strategy or behavior. Not because you have replaced her, which is not possible, but because you have stopped waiting for her, which is. You have stopped organizing your inner life around the question of whether she will finally deliver what was missing. And you have begun organizing it instead around what is actually present, what is actually available, what is actually real in the life you are living now, rather than the life you were living then. I know that many of you have been on this road for a long time. I know that what I have offered here today is not a solution in the tidy sense, not something you can implement tomorrow and find yourself healed by next week. What I hope it is, instead, is a reorientation, a different way of understanding where the wound actually lives, and therefore where the healing might actually go. The wound is not primarily about your mother. It is about the lesson you formed about your own worth in response to encountering her limitations. And that lesson, unlike your mother herself, is something you can gradually revise. Not by force, not by positive thinking, not by deciding to believe something different, but through the slow, patient, loving work of examination, through the growing capacity to be present to your own experience, without the old contractions being the only response available, through the discovery, made over and over in small and ordinary moments, that you are, and always were, worth receiving. If what we have explored together here has opened something for you, something you have been carrying quietly and feeling alone in, I want you to know that this community exists precisely for that. There are many people watching this who are walking this same road, asking the same questions, sitting with the same ache, doing the same slow and necessary work of revision. I create these explorations every week for people who are ready to go past the surface, who want genuine understanding rather than comfort, who sense that the questions they are carrying deserve rigorous and compassionate attention rather than easy answers. If that is you, if you want to keep exploring these territories with people who understand why the exploration matters, I would be honored to have you here. Subscribe if this feels like the right place. Not because you need another thing to watch, but because sustained inquiry held in community builds something over time that sporadic searching cannot. And drop a comment below telling me what struck you most in this exploration. What opened? What challenged you? What question is still alive in you now that was not quite formed before? I read every single comment, and your reflections genuinely shape where we go together. You are not alone in this. You never were. And so we return to the moment we began with, you in the kitchen or at the table, or waiting by the phone, feeling that contraction, that ancient familiar ache. It has not disappeared. It will not perhaps for a very long time, and maybe not entirely ever. But perhaps now in this moment you can notice something that was not quite visible before. The contraction is a memory being activated in a present moment. It is a record of a conclusion formed under conditions that no longer fully apply. It is the old lesson making its familiar appearance, reliable as weather, insistent as breath. And you, noticing it now with a little more understanding of where it came from and what it was actually recording, you are not required to simply be that lesson. You are the one who formed it, and you are also the one who, with enough attention and enough compassion and enough willingness to look clearly at what is actually there, can revise it. Slowly, imperfectly, not once and for all, but again and again, in the thousand small moments where the old conclusion rises, and you meet it with something more than the old response. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, the whole of it.